Good evening, everybody. Welcome to 4 Talks on Moshiach. We're going to start off this evening with Rabbi Katz. Rabbi Katz, on to you.
Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you this evening and to be able to share a few thoughts with you about Moshiach. As we know, it is a topic that is on everybody's lips, and it's something that we're thinking about on a regular basis, particularly during these somewhat difficult times. But it is all important at this moment to be spending some time thinking about Moshiach, learning a little bit about Moshiach, and hopefully this evening we'll be able to share with you some thoughts, some ideas, as well as some information about Moshiach. The first thing to start off with is to remember that the concept of Moshiach is a Jewish concept. Somehow, the concept of Moshiach has got a pretty bad rap over many, many centuries, and people have got the idea that maybe it's not a Jewish thought. Well, the Rambam tells us, Maimonides tells us, that if we do not believe in the coming of Moshiach and beg for and ask for the Moshiach to come each and every day, we actually aren't keeping one of the major principles of Torah, of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, of our Torah and our mitzvahs. We need to hook into and understand how essential it is to our lives, how important it is that he comes. And perhaps for my little part of this evening's agenda, I'd like to share with you a few thoughts on who is Moshiach. In other words, what are the credentials? What are the credentials for Moshiach? What would be the prototype? What would be the personality? What would be the persona of Moshiach? Well, the first thing is that Moshiach has to come from the tribe of Yehuda, the tribe of Judah. Now, we know that the Jewish people were divided up into many, many tribes, 12 of them, in fact, and only a few of those tribes actually have made it all the way through to today. And one of them is the tribe of Yehuda. And Moshiach has to come from that tribe of Yehuda. Now, this is somewhere where I would strike out. I happen to be a Kohen. I come from the tribe of Levi. And because I come from the tribe of Levi, I certainly would not be a Moshiach candidate. But if you come from the tribe of Yehuda, you're still in with a good chance. Then there's another qualification. Moshiach has to come from the house of David. The King David, who was anointed with oil that was poured on his head that made him anointed from a horn. This was the idea of the fact that the Davidic dynasty was going to continue ad infinitum. And King David, being the first of those kings, gave the name to the house of David. And if you can trace your ancestry all the way back to the house of David, well, then you're still in with a chance. Now, we've got to remember that the job of a king, if we think about the way that Torah describes it, the job of a king was not only to wage war and to lead the Jewish people in all matters that are civil as well as cultural and so on, but the concept of a king for all time, a Jewish king, was that he had to bring justice to the world. And there is no difference in the king that is going to arise in our time, now, the King Moshiach, that Moshiach has to be that too. He has to bring justice to the world. He has to be learned in Torah. So if you learn it in Torah, you're still in with a chance. He has to be observant of mitzvahs. And he has to spend his life compelling Israel to go in the ways of Torah. He has to reinforce the mitzvot and the performance of those mitzvot and bridge all the gaps within Judaism and between all Jews. And he has to ensure that he fights the wars for God. Fighting the wars for God is something that was essential, intrinsic to all the kings, and particularly has to be with the King Moshiach. The Moshiach, Messiah, the anointed king, has to fight the wars for God. Now, if he has all of those attributes, if he's got all of those credentials, according to the Rambam, Maimonides tells us that we can then assume that he could be Mashiach or a Mashiach candidate. He is in with a chance to be Moshiach. Now, it might strike you as strange that in the days of Rabbi Akiva and all the sages, and the Rambam quotes this, and he doesn't cast any negativity towards this concept. He says that Rabbi Akiva and all the sages of his time, now they were the greatest of the greats. They assumed that there was a man called the king Bar Kosiba, who took on the name as Bar Kochba, that he, in fact, they assumed to be the Melech HaMoshiach. They assumed him to be the Messiah, the Moshiach that we're waiting for. And the only time that they realized that it couldn't be that he was the Moshiach was when, tragically, he was killed in a battle, in a massacre that took place at a place called Beitar in the Roman era, killed, massacred by the Romans. And when Bar Kochba lay dead, Rabbi Akiva and the sages of the time realized that he was not Moshiach. So what does Moshiach have to accomplish? He has to accomplish the rebuilding of the temple in its rightful place in Yerushalayim. He has to bring together the dispersed of the Jewish people from all over the world. And when he does that, we can then absolutely underwrite the fact that that is Moshiach. So there are all of these lineal credentials. There are all of these credentials of Moshiach as to what it is that he has to actually accomplish. And once he's done that, we will know that we will be looking face to face, and in every era, every area, and every realm, and every part of our lives, we will have witnessed the coming of Moshiach. And so we hope and we pray that very, very soon we will be able to herald the arrival of that Moshiach, of the Moshiach that we've been waiting for, and that we pray for, and that we hope for each and every day of our lives. So please God, very, very soon, we will see the coming of Moshiach. And to tell you a little bit more about that era and about that time, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Rabbi Ari Kievman, who will address the topic of what the time of Moshiach will be like.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Katz, to try to put in a little presentation this. So if you can't follow along with the texts that I want to share, I will share them with you aloud very briefly. Rabbi Katz, you focused on Rambam chapter 11 of the Laws of Mashiach, and I want to move on to chapter 12 in the Laws of Mashiach. And I just want to take two quotes, one from Isaiah chapter 2, the very beginning, where the prophecy discusses that nations are going to beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And it says there, no nation will lift up sword against another nation, and they will no longer study warfare. So that's one verse. And the second verse is a very famous one in chapter 11, which talks about the wolf will lie with a lamb and the leopard will lie with a young goat. And as much as you described now the identity of who Mashiach is, well, I think we are already living in a time when we can identify with that future era. And just to think about it, already in our times, that discussion has been happening. That we won't destroy the swords or discard those spears, but instead, we will use those blades for their originally intended and productive purpose, which was, we're going to put an end to their abuse and misuse, even when weapons are necessary for righteous causes, for defensive purposes, like Israel has to defend its borders. That's not yet redemption. Redemption is when we can completely transform them. You think even of nuclear energy. It was created by God as a source of power, right? That's the purpose of nuclear energy, to be used as a source of power, to sustain and reduce our workloads. Nuclear energy is being used for bombs, even if the bombs are as a defense, is a nightmare. It's a corruption. So if we think about the Messianic era, we think about the time of redemption when Mashiach comes, it's a whole new world. It's a world literally of peace. During the times of the redemption, we're going to see how weapons, is for the purpose of beautifying God's garden. That's what this world is. This world, as King Solomon describes, Basi Legani, this world is God's garden. It's not a jungle. Sometimes the garden needs some pruning. Sometimes we see that there are weeds that need pruning, but the world is a garden. It is God's garden. And so when weapons are used or misused, that is the wrong way it's meant to be used. And think about how we are entering that era already. 28 years ago, in 1992, the heads of states of the United Nations Security Council and many of the temporary members as well, they met at the UN headquarters in New York to discuss the whole new world order, in which it was post-Cold War era, the fall of communism. And what did they talk about? Disarmament, global peace. That's the world we are going toward. And we know that we're in the year 5780. If you divide each of the millennia, then we're very, very close to the redemption. It's like Friday afternoon. We are here, and we're getting a taste of it now. So you just think about what the previous years were like. You know, today we don't have to work long back-breaking hours. People don't have to be in the fields and factories or workshops to put bread on your table, right? I know I don't want to minimize the pressures that people have today, especially during the pandemic, but it pales in comparison to what was the norm a century ago. We're that much closer to redemption. Today, workday hours are not the same as they were. It's like Shabbos is already becoming real, even if we're not actually there yet. But the average person today could afford a lifestyle that is unimaginable a century ago. We're literally at the brink of redemption, and we're having a taste of that redemption already today. And there are just so many ways that we could see those prophecies of Isaiah, that they are materializing, they're already happening. And, you know, you look at modern technology that really shows us how those prophecies are coming into fulfillment. So to go back to chapter 12 of Maimonides' laws of what it's going to be like when Moshiach comes. He says, during the times of Moshiach, there will be neither famine, nor war, nor envy, nor competition. What is the world going to be involved in? The whole world will be Umala ha'aretz de'as Hashem. Whole world will be filled with the knowledge of God, kamayim layam chasim, as the waters cover the ocean bed. Now just think about it. I ask you, my friends, and if you want, you could put your answers down in the chat. Just think, contemplate what Maimonides tells us here, quoting Isaiah, the prophecy that I read to you just before. That how many of these predictions have already begun to materialize? Just think about how close we are, and what I'm describing to you is what is going to be when Mashiach comes, and you're just getting a taste of that as we are here now. So just think, no more famine, nor war, nor envy or competition. Everything in the world will be abundant, like the water covers the seabed. And this is something that we're getting a taste of today. We described the wolf living with a lamb. You know, you could see, if you go to Kruger Park, you could see certainly, there are videos that are out there that are published seeing how that is. But just to conclude, we're getting a taste of it. Zoom, sharing the knowledge of God like the water covers the seabed. We're right here living it right here in this share. So let's move on to Rabbi Masinter, who will take us into how and what we can do to bring it to reality.
Thank you, Ari. I want to start with a sentence from Yecheskel. Yecheskel, the prophet, said as follows. He said, Koyo Mar Hashem, so says God Elokim. Hinani poseich es kvaroseichem. So says God Elokim, I'm going to open up your graves. I'm going to lift you out of your graves, and I'm going to bring you with me to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. Yecheskel said this prophecy 2,500 years ago. Who was Yecheskel addressing? He was addressing us. He was addressing our generation. He was addressing the generation of Moshiach. And what he was saying was that not only to those people who are living will Moshiach redeem, but even those people who've passed away, those people who are buried in Montreal or Montevideo, Melbourne or Johannesburg, God is going to open their graves and he's going to bring them to Israel with the coming of Moshiach. Let's extend the thought. Adam and Eve were created by God. The first children to be born in this world were the children of Adam and Eve. Now, out of all the children that Adam and Eve had, only 3 are mentioned in the Torah. The firstborn, Cain, Abel, and Seth. But all the other children, the hundreds of children that had, the boys and girls, none of them are mentioned in the Torah, only these 3. Why? The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe explains in a discourse that because these three correspond to the three different types of that are going to live in this world. Cain was wicked. The name Cain means to acquire. Cain was totally absorbed in this world. Cain lived for the here and now. Cain didn't want to believe that there's a life after this. He didn't want to believe that one day a Moshiach is going to come and heaven is going to be revealed on earth. And because Cain was totally absorbed in this world, therefore he was corrupt. That was Cain. Cain, if you look carefully, God's name of mercy is attached to Cain. Because Cain had the wherewithal to change, but he failed. Maybe later on in life, he got it right. But at first, he didn't get it right. Abel, on the other hand, was the tzaddik. And in fact, Moses was a reincarnation of Abel. We won't go into that now. That's for another shiur. But nonetheless, Abel is the tzaddik. Abel was the individual who realized that God created this world and put man in it for man to become a partner with God, and in this physical, mundane, dark world, bring godliness to be revealed in this world by bettering oneself and bettering the world around. Now, we all know the story, Cain killed Abel. Now, when we read the story on a simple level, it's history. It's what happened 5,780 years ago. But on a deeper level, on a more personal level, on a more spiritual level, the Torah tells us that each and every one of us have a Cain and Abel within us. The Abel within us is our godly soul. It's that part of us that wants to connect to God. It's that part of us that wants to do the right thing. As I said, it's that part of us that wants to better ourselves and change the world around us. That's Abel. Cain, on the other hand, is our animal soul. It's our Yetzer Hara. It's that part of us that just wants to have a joy no matter what the consequences are. As we go through our journey in life, it's possible that the Cain kills the Abel. It's possible for us to fall into the abyss of negativity and sin to such a degree that we don't even feel our Abel. We can be buried in materialism. We can be buried in the vices of life. We can become so buried that we don't even feel our godly soul. What's going to happen? Yecheskel tells us that God is going to send something to the world. He's going to awaken us. He's going to take us out of our graves. He's going to send something to us that's going to give us time to rethink through our lives, to reevaluate our lives, to get our life right. He's going to give us a time that we're going to be locked up at home just to be able to get our lives right. And at that moment, what's going to happen? When he opens up our grave, what's going to happen? We're going to be inspired to become a Seth. What is Seth? Seth means to return, to become a new person. We have the ability to return to God. So in this time now, we have the ability to get in touch with the Seth part of our soul, the highest level of our soul, that part of our soul that never becomes disconnected to God. As we go through our journey in life, we can become a little bit disconnected here and there. But at core level of the soul, we can never become disconnected. When God opens up our grave, when he sends this pandemic to us, which gives us time to get our life right, we're able to get in touch with that level of our soul that's always connected to God. And at that level, when we do that, then we merit for God to take us out of the grave and take us with him to the land of Israel. In other words, we're able to become a completely new person. And I want to conclude with a thought as follows. Every Hebrew letter has a numerical value, and therefore every word has a numerical value. The numerical value of the Hebrew word shliach, emissary, is 348. 348. Now, we are all emissaries from God in this world. Every single human being is an emissary from God in this world to make this place into a dwelling place for God. How do we do that? Well, each and every one of us has a soul. The soul has 10 powers, 3 intellectual, 7 emotional. We won't go into that now. But when we realize that we're an emissary from God, and we use the 10 powers of our soul, what does it add up to? 358, Moshiach. We reveal Moshiach within us. And by doing that, we become ready for the big redemption where God will take us out of godless, he'll take us out of exile, where godliness will be revealed in this world, and there'll be peace for all mankind. But how to bring Moshiach, I want to pass you on to somebody who's an embodiment of that principle, somebody who spends his days and night bringing Moshiach. Shlomo, it's on to you.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all well and warm. For those people in KwaZulu-Natal, beautiful weather. Thank you very much for being able to be part of this panel. And to my esteemed colleagues, I would like to share just how to go about this. We see now that one man in Wuhan, China, did an action, whatever that action was, and from that, the whole world is turned upside down. Turned upside down. 578 years ago, Adam, one man, was in the Garden of Eden, and he also did one action that not only turned his world upside down, but turned our world upside down. Now still, we're still feeling the repercussions of that. Let me explain. Before Adam did what he did, what did he see? He saw godliness. He experienced godliness. He felt godliness. He knew godliness. Adam didn't have faith in God. He knew, he had knowledge. That he knew God. But once he committed his action from eating from the tree, that all changed. That all changed not only for them, but for always. And what happened was God, so to speak, leaped out of the garden. His presence wasn't felt the way it was at first before that. And then all the repercussions that we experience today, pain, hatred, jealousy, death, greed, corruption, all those concepts that we see and experience in our lives all stem from that one action. Now, I want to share something with you further. Moshiach is going to usher in a redemption state of being. What does that mean? The Hebrew for that is called Geula. Geula was what it was prior to Adam eating from the tree. How we experience now, where we don't see and experience and feel godliness, that's called Golus. Geula is redemption, Golus is exile. What's the difference? One letter. One letter, the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And that is Aleph is the Alufa Shalom, master of the world. And what we need to do is to find a way to restore godliness that we can see and experience, not just intellectually or faith that there's a God, but actually see the revelation of godliness in the world. And we need Moshiach to be part of that process to hasten to come. But how do we do it? How do we do it? And that's what I'm going to share with you now. One is acts of goodness and kindness. Any action of goodness and kindness. A good deed, a favor, a spiritual favor, or a physical, material favor for somebody, you know the person or not. Another mitzvah. A mitzvah is a good deed, a righteous deed. I want to share with you a personal story. I was fortunate enough to be and spend time with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I enjoyed the Verbrings, didn't understand all the Yiddish, and the Hebrew, only got a gist of it. And but I got it. I was there and I embraced it entirely. And I was fortunate to go past the Rebbe on several occasions to get dollars, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's when Jews and non-Jews, people from all walks of life would stand in line by the Rebbe, and he would give them $1 and he'd give them a blessing, which happened to me. And some people would stand and ask the Rebbe in the few moments that they had some advice, a suggestion, additional blessing. And the final time that I was by the Rebbe, I thought, this is my time and I'm going to ask Rebbe for a bracha. I wasn't really sure what it was, but I was going to do that. And I stood in line and I came in front of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave me $1 and he said, bracha v'atzlacha. And I said, Amen. Blessing and success. And I said, Amen. This should be true. And then I felt the pushing, shoving me down the line, and I kept my ground, and I moved my head forward, and I was very close to the Rebbe. Our eyes locked in. Our souls felt connected. I felt like this was a moment of eternity just right there. And I had the courage, and I said to the Rebbe, I would like to ask the Rebbe for a blessing to go back to Israel to finish my studies in yeshiva and then to come back to South Africa. And the Rebbe said, Amen. And the Rebbe gave me another $1 and he said, Viten or tzedakah. And with that, I got moved right out. It was, I remember very clearly, it was quite a simple Hebrew. For me, the Rebbe understood me and knew everything about me. I had been there for a while. I shared a lot of things, even in my letters. The Rebbe said, for 10 odd tzedakah. So my first instinct after that is when people were asking for money, I would give extra coin and extra $1. And when I went back to Israel, when I saw people there, you know, when I was in Yerushalayim, wherever it was, gave a little bit extra. And that's how my life has been for many years. Here in Mshlanga, it's involved in being able to give. And not just give, but for 10 odd, give more. And in the last year or so, I've been thinking more and more about it, and I realized that the Rebbe didn't just mean one thing. The 10 odd tzedakah, start off and give, means give more than what you're already giving in any field. If you look at chapter 21 of Tanya, it's about tzedakah being equal to all the other mitzvahs. In the Gemara in Baba Basra, it says there that the mitzvah tzedakah comprises of all the other mitzvahs. That also tells us that tzedakah and acts of kindness are equivalent to all the mitzvahs of the Torah. That you find in the Gemara in Yerushalmi in Peah. So the Rebbe was really giving me a bit of a cryptic message for me at the time, but as I've matured, I've realized the Rebbe wasn't saying just one mitzvah, give more tzedakah. The Rebbe said that in all aspects of Torah and mitzvahs, always give more, always increase. And that's how we try to live our lives, and that's how I try to teach my family as well as our community and people I come in touch with. The Rambam, who we've heard quite a bit about, tells us that the whole world is on a scale, and it's at a balance. And one good deed that we do can weigh it out for good, can hasten the coming of Moshiach, can bring about the redemption. If it can happen in Wuhan, that some person does an act over there, and this is the effect that we see around us, and so totally confused. Some people are benefiting from, other people are struggling, all kind of crazy world. You can be sure that when we do one more mitzvah, one more good deed, one more act of righteousness, an act of kindness and goodness, that it's going to change the world, and it's going to have a ripple effect to the furthest ends of the universe. And for sure, according to Rambam, that one good deed will hasten the coming of Mashiach. But there's something that I have to add at this point. We might now know how, but there's an attitude. There's an attitude on how we have to do that. And again, in Bava Kama mentions there in the 38th page, it says there that it's a great virtue to act with alacrity, eagerness, and enthusiasm with respect to our mitzvahs, to all our mitzvahs. And we can see this, okay, when it comes to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, Abraham, when he was going to the Akedah to take his son, Yitzchak, to sacrifice his son, he got up early in the morning to saddle his donkey. He didn't procrastinate and wait and put things off until tomorrow or something, maybe God will change his mind. Or he didn't ask any questions. He acted on it with enthusiasm because now is the most important time. When we look at our davening, especially the Amidah, it's got many, many blessings within the Amidah that we mention 3 times a day, referring to Mashiach and to the redemption. Samach David, the sounding of the great shofar. When we want somebody to be well also, with the refuah shlema, and you take a close look at it, all in the present tense. We don't wish somebody a speedy recovery in 3 months' time. We ideally want them to have a recovery and a total recovery right now. We live in the present, not in the past. We learn from that. In the future, we don't know what's going to be in the future. We can see it from the last 2-3 months that we're living here. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We can try to plan wisely, but we don't know how it's going to turn out. All we can be sure of is what we do right now. And with that, I'm going to conclude with a story. A story about Rabbi Brisky from America, also a shliach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He told us this story. He said once, it was Pesach, and he invited the president of the local Orthodox community to come to his Pesach Seder. The president said, sure, but we're going to come second night because the first night he's having his own Pesach Seder. So Rabbi Brisky said, with pleasure, no problem. We're looking forward to have you. And so he came at a wonderful Seder, and Pesach went by. And straight after Pesach, he got a lovely letter, Rabbi Brisky, from the president of the local Orthodox community, where he said that he had the most amazing Pesach, but the highlight was coming to Rabbi Brisky for the Pesach Seder. It had such an impact on him, and it changed his life. Rabbi Brisky was curious to find what it was. I mean, was it the food? Was it the great wine? Maybe he had more shmura matzah there. He had good grain. What was it that happened? What word did he say? Something at the table that had such an impact on the president of the Orthodox community. So he made an appointment, he went to see him, and the president said as follows. I came to your second night, and your table was laid beautifully, best crockery and cutlery, great cut glass. Everything was outstanding. You had a warm table, lots of guests. There was a tremendous feeling of the youth. And you were about to make Kiddush when you saw and you noticed that your young daughter wasn't at the table. So you called for her. And she was next door in the bathroom. And when you called for her, she responded, Tati, please don't start without me. Rabbi Brisky remembered. So the president said, I want to tell you what happened by us on the first night. On the first night of Pesach, we also had a table beautifully laid out, best finest crockery and cutlery, and my wife had prepared so beautifully. We had guests. And everything was wonderful. We had a lovely feeling and nice energy in the air. And then I was about to make Kiddush. And I looked around and I saw that my teenage son wasn't at the table. So I called for him and I didn't get a response. So I went upstairs to his room and I saw him lying on his bed with his computer open. And he was watching his football team playing football. And I said to him, oh boy, we're about to start the Pesach Seder. Please come downstairs and join us. And he replied, please don't wait for me. Start without me. We have to fulfill these mitzvahs, these good deeds, these acts of goodness and righteousness and kindness, as the Rebbe told us in publicized it was CNN, with passion, with eagerness. I can't wait to be able to do the next mitzvah. I can't wait for Sukkot, to Shekel Olav and Israel. I can't wait until lockdown is over, so I'm going, I can put tefillin on people, because now I can't touch them. I can't wait to be able to go and do the mitzvahs to make a difference in the world, because you can make a difference in the world. Don't think that it's not in your reach. Each and every one of us, as our speaker said, has an element of Moshiach within him and her. It can make a difference in the world just by going out and doing acts of goodness and kindness, acts of righteousness. Righteousness is tzedakah. It doesn't mean just collecting tzedakah or giving tzedakah, but it's encompassing all the mitzvahs. And I'll just end with a quote from the Gemara in Baba Basra, where it says, great is tzedakah, for it hastens the redemption near. I wish you a good evening and make good resolutions to help to bring Moshiach now. Thank you very much.